When people think about Resident Evil, the first thing that usually comes to mind is horror. Zombies shuffling down hallways, grotesque creatures bursting through walls, eerie music playing in the background, and that constant feeling that something terrible is waiting just around the corner. But if you step back for a moment and really look at what these games are asking you to do as a player, you start to realize something interesting. Resident Evil isn't just a horror series. It's also one of the most mentally demanding gaming experiences out there. These games are constantly forcing your brain to work in ways that most other games simply don't. And I am not just talking about reflexes or aiming accuracy. Resident Evil is a completely different kind of animal. It's a challenge of memory, spatial awareness, decision making, and problem solving all happening at the same time. While the game is actively trying to stress you out, the result is a kind of gameplay experience that feels less like a casual adventure and more like a psychological obstacle course where your brain is constantly being tested. One of the biggest reasons for this is how Resident Evil handles environments. Unlike many modern games that holds your hand with objective markers and convenient shortcuts, Resident Evil throws you into complex locations that you have to learn and understand over time. Think about places like the Spencer Mansion in the original game, the Raccoon City Police Department in Resident Evil 2, or Castle Dimitrescu in Resident Evil Village. These locations aren't just backdrops for action, they're carefully designed spaces that slowly become familiar to you as you explore them. In the beginning, these environments feel overwhelming. You open a door and step into a hallway that branches into multiple directions, some of which are locked, some of which lead to new areas, and some of which lead directly into danger. The game doesn't tell you exactly where to go. Instead, it expects you to pay attention. You start memorizing where certain doors are, where puzzles are located, where enemies tend to appear, and where you can safely navigate without wasting precious resources. This process of mentally mapping the environment is actually one of the most fascinating aspects of Resident Evil design. Over time, the layout of these areas becomes something you can picture in your head almost like a real place. You remember that the save room is two corridors away from the library, that the key you just found unlocks a door near the west wing, and that the shortcut you opened earlier might help you avoid a dangerous section filled with enemies. The game slowly trains your brain to build and maintain a mental map, which is something that surprisingly few modern games demand from players. But memorizing the map is only one part of the challenge. Resident Evil is also famous for its puzzles. And these puzzles are rarely simple. They often require you to observe your surroundings carefully, read documents and clues scattered throughout the environment, and combine pieces of information that might have been discovered hours earlier. Sometimes you find a strange object that seems useless at first, only to realize that it fits perfectly into a mechanism you encountered much earlier in the game. This kind of design forces you to keep multiple threads of information active in your mind at all times. You're constantly asking yourself questions like, where did I see a symbol like this before? Which room had the strange device on the wall? Was there a locked drawer somewhere that required this key? The game isn't just testing your ability to solve puzzles in isolation. It's testing your ability to remember and connect details across long stretches of gameplay, all while being in really stressful situation. And then there is the famous Resident Evil mechanic that many players both love and hate. Backtracking. In most games, backtracking is considered a bad design, but in Resident Evil, it's an essential part of the experience. When you find a new key or solve a part of a puzzle, you often have to return to earlier sections of the map to unlock new areas. This means you are constantly revisiting familiar places, but those places are rarely exactly the same as when you left them. Maybe a hallway that was once safe now has enemies waiting for you. Maybe the path you took earlier is no longer the best option because you have used up too much ammunition. Every time you retrace your step, the game forces you to re-evaluate your strategy and adapt to the current situation. Tracking isn't just about walking through old areas again. It's about thinking critically about how the world has changed and how your resources have changed along with it. Speaking of resources, inventory management is another major reason Resident Evil feels like a mental workout. Unlike many action games where you can carry an entire arsenal without thinking about it, Resident Evil forces you to make difficult decisions about what you bring with you and what you choose to leave behind. Your inventory space is limited, and every item you pick up takes up valuable room. This creates constant tension in the decision making process. Do you carry extra ammunition or do you save space for healing items? Should you bring that puzzle item now or leave it in the storage box until you are sure you need it? Is it worth carrying multiple weapons or should you commit to a single strategy for the upcoming area? Every choice has consequences and the wrong decision can leave you in a dangerous situation later on. Resource management extends beyond inventory space as well. Ammunition, healing items, and other supplies are deliberately scarce in Resident Evil games. The scarcity forces you to think carefully about every encounter. Shooting every enemy you see might feel satisfying in the moment, but doing so can leave you completely unprepared for a boss fight later on. Sometimes the smartest move isn't fighting at all. It's simply running, dodging, and preserving your resources for when they're truly needed. What makes all of this even more intense is the psychological horror atmosphere that surrounds these mechanics. Resident Evil doesn't just challenge your brain in a calm environment. It challenges your brain while deliberately trying to make you anxious, tense, and uncomfortable. Dark corridors, eerie sound designs, and unpredictable enemy encounters creates a constant sense of pressure that affects how you think and react. When your heart rate is elevated and your nerves are on edge, making rational decisions becomes much harder. Suddenly, you're trying to solve puzzles, remember map layouts, manage resources, and plan routes while your brain is also dealing with the fear of what might happen next. It's like trying to complete a complex mental task while someone is constantly tapping you on the shoulder and whispering that something terrible is about to appear behind you. This combination of cognitive challenge and emotional stress is what makes Resident Evil so uniquely engaging. The game is essentially asking you to stay calm, think clearly, and make smart decisions, while the entire atmosphere is designed to push you into panic mode. Learning to maintain control in those situations becomes part of the player's skill set. Another fascinating aspect of Resident Evil design is how the game reward observation. Small details in the environment often hint at solutions or dangers that might not be immediately obvious. A strange symbol on the wall, a note left behind by a previous victim, or a subtle change in lighting can all provide important clues. Players who pay attention to these details often find themselves solving puzzles more efficiently and avoiding unnecessary dangers. Over time, experienced Resident Evil players develop a kind of investigative mindset. They start examining rooms carefully, reading documents closely, and thinking about how every element of the environment might connect to something else. The habit of observation and analysis is another way series engages the brain beyond simple reaction-based gameplay. All of these elements creates together a gameplay experience that feels incredibly rewarding. When you finally solve a complicated puzzle, lock a new section of the map or defeat a boss, after carefully managing your resources, the satisfaction that follows is something else. You didn't just press buttons quickly, you thought your way through a series of interconnected challenges. And that's one of the reasons Resident Evil has maintained such a strong following for decades. Players keep coming back not just for the horror, but for the feeling of mental engagement that this series provides. These games respect the player's intelligence. They trust that you can observe, remember, analyze, and adapt without constant guidance. In an era where games prioritize accessibility and convenience, Resident Evil continues to embrace complexity and tension. It challenges players to think, to plan, and to stay composed under pressure. The horror might be what attracts people initially, but the mental challenge is what keeps them invested long after the first scare. So, the next time when someone says Resident Evil is just a zombie game, it might be worth pointing out that beneath the horror and action lies something much deeper. Resident Evil is a series that quietly turns every player into a strategist, an investigator, and a problem solver, all while facing death. And in that sense, every trip through a haunted mansion or infected city isn't just survival horror, it's a full blown workout for your brain. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Do like, share, and subscribe since this is a new channel. It helps the video reach out to more people like you. Thanks for watching and see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.